today is going to take a slightly different format to our last few masterclasses. So I'm going to introduce Claire, but then actually Claire is going to walk us through a case study of how she's designed customer experiences that customers love. So really looking forward to some really practical and tangible experience. And actually Claire and I were just talking before this call. I think a common preconception is that customer experience is customer service, or that service design is seen as very fluffy. So hopefully today that will break down some of those misconceptions. So Claire, before we get started, do you want to tell us a bit about your career and how did you end up in this role of customer experience designer?
Yeah, so my background really has always been in marketing. I started out in the Diageo graduate program, so I would have done sales and marketing through that. So that was a fantastic organization to start with, because Diageo were so consumer focused and very intent on getting to know as much insights about consumers as possible. And they're very much about kind of leadership development as well. So a brilliant place to start a career, but also get that kind of customer lens. So some of the projects I would have worked on there would have been, I was the experiential brand manager for Captain Morgan across Western Europe. And I also led out or supported on the innovation team for Smirnoff. So launching things like Smirnoff flavors into Western Europe. And I suppose that was where I saw the need for including consumers in what you're doing. So one of the projects that we tried to launch in Smirnoff was 2 flavors called marshmallow and whipped cream, which had been absolutely huge in the States, where they had launched about 6 months previous. It was the largest launch that Smirnoff US had ever had. Amber Rose was the spokesperson. So the idea was we would take that model from the States and replicate it in Western Europe. And everything, I suppose, aligned. You know, we had production facilities were set up, we had packaging, bottling, we had distribution, we had stores who were lined up to buy this from us. But where we kept falling down again and again was in consumer testing. The Western Europe palate and response to these products was so different to the States, where they tend to enjoy kind of sweeter alcoholic drinks than they do in Western Europe. And try as we might, we did focus groups, we did testing, the consumers were just never kind of giving it a thumbs up, and we'd spent a lot of money on the project, but in the end we had to scrap it because it didn't meet consumer needs. And I think that was kind of an early introduction to how important it is to validate your assumptions with consumers early, and sometimes a success is not launching a project because it's not the right thing for your consumers. So after that, I moved to a startup drinks company called Quintessential Brands, where I was an international brand manager for their Irish creams portfolio. So working very much on international distribution and promotion of Irish creams. And about 5 years ago, I moved back to Ireland and from London. And I've been working with Musgrave Retail Partners Ireland since then. So Musgrave are the largest retail group in Ireland. They're actually the largest private employer in Ireland. They have we have a wholesale business, we have a food service business, so it's a really huge organization. And the part that I work in is focused on retail. So I've been very lucky in Musgrave to work in a variety of roles. I've worked in their brand extensions team, so looking at the potential of launching new technology products like mobile phone networks, those kind of extensions onto the brand. I've also worked in the strategy for Super Value and Centra brands, which would be our 2 largest retail brands in Ireland. I have worked as the national brand manager for Centra, so all of their advertising and comms. And then about a year and a half ago, I moved into the customer experience role that I'm doing now. So actually it was interesting because I was on a call last week with the CXPA in Ireland, and the majority of people who are practicing customer experience in Ireland now have come from marketing backgrounds. So there's a lot of similarities. And I suppose what I would have always described marketing as is finding out what your customers want and building a solution for them. And sometimes in brand management, that's not actually the case. The case is that you've got a solution already built and you're trying to convince people to buy it off you rather than the other way around. So I find that customer experience and service design, which is what I'm doing now, probably has more of that approach of actually knowing what your customers want and designing the right solution for them. So it kind of fits with what I've been doing in my career all along, but it's definitely an interesting route and really enjoying it.
Brilliant, thank you. So really varied to come in. I really like the comparisons with marketing as well. What I'm going to do is hand over to you now, Claire, to talk us through how you actually do your job, which I guess is what people are here for. How do you design experiences that customers love? I'll just say to the audience that the Q&A is open. Please just ask your questions throughout the session on the chat, and we'll try to get to them either during it or at the end. So please pop any questions in the Q&A box or in the chat, and I'll hand over to you, Claire, to take us through.
Perfect, thanks a million. So what I'm going to do is talk you through the approach that we use to designing customer experiences in Musgrave, and I'm going to use the case study of Moo'd ice cream just so you can see the full end-to-end process. But I suppose just to say, this is how we approach all projects that we're looking at through the customer lens, and we work on a variety of projects. So we'd work on really strategic things like what the value proposition is in super value. We'd work on new future brands. So we have a kind of new brands incubator within Musgrave, and all of which Moo'd would have come out of, and all of the projects that we do with them go through the customer experience lens as well. And we've also trained up a network of ambassadors within Musgrave to take this approach as well. So we're kind of by stealth getting service design and customer experience really embedded in Musgrave. So just for those of you on the call who don't know who Musgrave are, I'm conscious we're not very widely known outside of Ireland. Musgrave's it's actually a 144-year-old this year, and it's a family-owned business. It's always been family-owned. So it started off as a shop in Cork City, and it's grown exponentially over that time. So as I said, it's the largest private employer in Ireland. It feeds 1 in 3 people on the island of Ireland every day. So that just gives you an idea of the kind of scale and complexity of it. So it's got a wholesale business, food service business, on-trade business. There's a Northern Ireland division, and then the part that I work in is Musgrave Retail Partners Ireland. So our 2 largest brands would be SuperValu, which is a network of supermarkets across the Republic of Ireland, and Centra, which is a chain of convenience stores. So there's about 450 convenience stores around Ireland. We also have brands like Donnybrook Fair, which is a kind of upscale premium food retailer. We then have that kind of future brands incubator that I spoke about. So some of the brands we've launched through that are Frank and Honest Coffee, Moo'd ice cream, which I'll talk you through now, Caramico Pizza, Nosh & Co Catering, and we've recently signed a partnership with the Happy Pear, who are a vegetarian brand, and we're responsible for the product development and distribution of all of their packaged goods now as well. So pretty comprehensive, pretty complicated system, as you can imagine. And then just adds further complications. Most of our stores, so most Centra and SuperValu stores, are independently owned by independent retailers. So from a customer experience perspective, that means that we really have 2 sets of customers. We have our end consumers, but we have our retail customers as well, and they're a huge stakeholder in what we do. So when we're designing, we need to be designing to suit their needs as equally as our end consumers. So I've kind of put this slide up because I suppose these are some of the major companies in the world right now, and really seen as kind of leaders and innovators. And why they stand out is that the successful companies in the world today are putting the customers at the heart of what they do. But not only that, customers now have so much choice available to them that their expectations have really risen, and it means that you're not just expected to be as good as the competitors within your own industry, they're actually benchmarking you against all of their experiences. So for example, if you're used to using a service like Netflix, which is really user-friendly, really intuitive, it remembers you, it knows what you like, you kind of, that's your new benchmark for how you expect online shopping to be. So even for when you're designing a grocery shopping experience online, you're trying to look at what people are used to and what can improve the experience for them. And when we talk about retail, I suppose retail is a very competitive field, especially grocery retail. It's very industry. So anything that we can do to improve the customer experience can really stand out. And in Musgrave, we have a new CEO as of January this year, and he's actually put customer experience at the heart of his vision for the company, which is great. And, you know, I suppose it's just showing that from the top, people are recognizing the importance of building experiences around customers. So what I'm showing here is just, it's from Forrester, it's the pyramid of customer experience, and it just shows the kind of different stages that you need to go through to deliver a great customer experience. So at the bottom is effectiveness. So for retail, this means things like having a clean store, that the products are easy to see. The next level is ease, so that it's easy for a customer to fulfill their need. So that might be things like having online shopping available to them, that the pricing in store is easy to understand, or that they can navigate around a store with no hassle. And then emotion is the top and the peak of customer experience. And if you can deliver emotion to people, you'll really increase the loyalty of your customers. It's the hardest one to achieve, definitely. But it creates memorable moments and memory imprints for people, which means they'll see you and your brand in a favorable way and keep coming back. So things that can stand out here are really great customer experience or customer rewards, for example, in a retail environment. So that's, I suppose, just how we see customer experience in Musgrave. The team I work in is relatively new. We're only around about 4 years, and I suppose we exist to be the voice of the customer within Musgrave and to make Musgrave a more consumer-centric business. So rather than being focused on KPIs and kind of pushing products out to people, we're very much now about looking at things through the consumer's eyes and designing for their needs. So how do we do that? Well, today I'm going to talk you through a case study about Moo'd ice cream. And I'm going to, so Moo'd ice cream has ambitions to be the largest ice cream brand in Ireland. It was set up in 2016 by Musgrave, so it's an internal project, and it was set up originally to replace the ice cream counters in Centra stores. But after about a year of its existence, it wasn't hitting the KPIs or targets that it set out to achieve. So that's why we went back at the project through a design thinking lens, which I'll talk through now, to see where we could improve it and if we could enhance it. And get as well, because that was quite slow at the time. So some or many of you on the call might be very familiar with the design thinking methodology. I suppose I like it because it's very easy to understand, it's easy to explain to stakeholders, and it just helps to put a structure around a project. But I'm also very mindful that design thinking is more about the mindset than it is about the process. But the process and the tools definitely help you to kind of get to that mindset of thinking customer-centric and making sure that customers are involved in every step of what you're doing. So I'll just talk you through the different steps there for anyone who's unfamiliar with it. So as you can see, it follows a double diamond shape. So what we'll do is start off at the very start, excuse me, of the discovery phase with a hypothesis or a problem that we want to solve. And we'll do loads of consumer research to widen out all the possible areas that we can go after and understand as much about the problem as we can. So it kind of diverges out wide. once we have looked at that, we'll prioritize what's feasible and what will make the biggest difference to our customers. So that's the define stage, and we converge all our findings back in then into what's going to deliver the biggest impact. Based on those findings, we will ideate with as wide a team as we possibly can find. So we'll always try to include all stakeholders of a project. So everybody from the purchasing team to marketing, to the retailers, to consumers themselves. Sometimes we'll use external experts as well, just to get as many kind of ideas and diverse thinking as we can. And then, as you can see, that's diverged again. So to bring that back in, we'll prioritize what we need to do. We'll test concepts with consumers to see what lands best with them, and that will help shape what we ultimately deliver out to market. The important thing to know about the double diamond process is that it is completely iterative. You could start at any stage of that diamond and you're jumping back and forth the whole time. So you're always researching and rechecking an idea, and nothing's ever perfect. But I'll talk you through the steps now and how we use it to improve the Moo'd experience. So discover. So in the discovery phase, you're starting with a problem or an opportunity you've identified, and you do as much research as possible to get insight into the opportunity. So what you're doing here is you're trying to look at the problem through the eyes of your customer and really empathize with them and understand things from their point of view. So it's very important to keep open-minded and understand what they're telling you. Don't make assumptions. And I think that might be one of the hard things when you start in kind of customer experience or taking this design approach is you know your business really well, but your customers know themselves. So just stay open-minded and listen to them. So some of the tools we'll use at this stage are your kind of typical research tools. So we'll do desk research, surveys. We're very lucky to have an internal survey and shop talk panel that we can access, as well as wider access to Red Sea and partners like that. By far the tool that I find the most useful is actually spending time with your customers and observing their behavior. So I'll do a lot of accompanied shops in store with people, see what areas of the store that they gravitate to, for example, and then interview them. So in-depth interviews to understand their motivations and just really get to know them. Other things that we'll do are user diaries. So maybe get somebody to keep a diary for a couple of weeks to understand their behavior, their emotions, what they purchase, what they don't. So it's just really helpful. And I suppose we'll always try to use a mix of those methods as well to be as impactful as possible. So with Moo'd, we did use a mix of them. We researched the ice cream industry in Ireland and overseas, but also other similar industries like bakeries to see what's happening there, what are the upcoming trends, and just to get ideas of what a great experience looks like. We spent a lot of time in store with different types of consumers, different ages. We saw how did they interact with the ice cream counters that we currently had in store and with competitors, and we interviewed consumers on their thoughts. So really interesting things can pop up here. We were shopping with one little boy, he's about 5 years old, and his mother, and he asked his mom if he could have 2 scoops of ice cream. So he had his flavors picked out what he wanted. But when he approached the counter and his mom asked for 2 scoops, as the woman was going to fill the cup for him, he changed his mind and said he only wanted 1 scoop of ice cream. So that was interesting behavior to observe. So after he had paid for his ice cream, we were interviewing, we said, why did you change your mind and go from 2 scoops to 1 scoop? And the reason was because the cup that 2 scoops were served in was a pink cup, and the cup that 1 scoop was served in was a bluey greeny coloured cup, and he didn't want to be seen carrying a pink cup around. So he was a 5-year-old boy, and that just embarrassed him. So that's not something that we would ever have thought of having an impact on sales, but if that's literally having your sales because it's a barrier to some of your consumers, then that's something that has to be changed. the second stage then is define. So once we've done all of our research, we'll end up with too much information. So if we went after everything, it wouldn't be meaningful. So what we do is we theme the research. And that way it becomes clear what really matters to shoppers and where you can make the biggest difference to them. So this stage really helps to define the problem you're trying to solve or the opportunity you're trying to create. And it means you're focusing on meaningful ideas and not just trying things out for the sake of it. And often what you'll find is that the problem that you started off with, the problem statement, will be changed at this stage because you'll have gotten a really deep understanding of your consumers and you'll understand what really matters to them. So again, some of the tools that we'll use here, and I can send around useful links for these afterwards, I can put them up on the community, are things like personas, where we create personas for our customers. So we can't design for every individual, but what we'll do is we'll look for similarities, so common personality traits, needs and desires of our consumers, and we'll build a fictional persona based on that, and that's who we're designing for then. And we may end up having multiple personas. So for example, one of our personas for Moo'd is Jane. She's a 14-year-old. She loves hanging out with her friends, and every Saturday she goes to the local shopping centre to spend the day browsing. She gets €20 pocket money every week to spend on what she needs. So they usually go for sweets and snacks, but you're kind of designing what matters to Jane so that she'll spend that €20 with Moo'd. Another tool that we'll use here is affinity mapping. So basically we'll write every insight. I'm seeing if I have some here. I actually threw some in the bin earlier, but like I'll have all my post-it notes up there on a wall, and every single post-it note will have a finding from our research on it. And you can stand back and kind of look at your wall of research and insights and then start to group things into themes that emerge, and you'll start to see what themes are dominant. I'll always use a different color post-it for each person I've spoken to, so then under each theme you can see the more colors it has, the more it matters to different people as well. So that's just a kind of helpful design tip that I use. We'll also decide here what's our assessment criteria. So are we looking at how viable this is, how much money it's going to deliver, and kind of pass it through that bucket as well. And we'll start to prioritize as well the themes based on our business capabilities and the viability of them as well. So when we use these methods in Moo'd, a few themes started to emerge, and we usually call these design drivers. So anything then that we design has to meet these needs or these design drivers. So we had 3 very simple design drivers for Moo'd. The first was make it easier. So people found the current experience quite complicated to understand, and buying ice cream should be a very simple experience. Make it more attractive, so people didn't really see why Moo'd was any better than the ice cream counters that it had replaced, or going to an ice cream counter in a different store. And make it memorable. So ice cream is a very emotive experience. Usually it's something that people eat together rather than on their own. So where was the opportunity to make it memorable and create heightened emotion and really stick out in people's heads? So we moved on then to the develop stage. And as I said, I know I'm presenting these sequentially, but in real life you are kind of jumping back and forth between all the different stages. So the develop stage is definitely the fun part. So this is where we get to come up with loads of different ideas to solve the problems or opportunities that we've already defined in the define stage. So we'll also create prototypes here and test those out with consumers. We have different kind of levels of fidelity of prototyping, but it's always best to kind of start very quick and rough and test assumptions early. And the point of this stage really is come up with as many ideas as possible and don't be afraid of making mistakes. So you're not trying to deliver a perfect service at this stage. You're really going for a quantity of ideas. I heard a stat before that it takes 40,000 ideas to come up with one good idea. So we'll always encourage in any workshops or anything we're running that people go after quantity of ideas, and this isn't the stage to be, you know, kind of trying to limit your creativity. So some of the tools that we'll use here to help are things like scenarios. So for example, with Moo'd, one scenario might be somebody coming in to get a cone to take away, and somebody else might be coming in with a group of friends, and they're going to sit down in store and enjoy their ice cream. So you're looking at what are the different uses and scenarios that somebody's going to interact with your service. We'll use things like service blueprints to map out every stage of the customer's journey, but also what are they interacting with at that stage, who are they interacting with, and what needs to be set up in the background to achieve that. We'll look at things like brainstorming, so we'll hold brainstorming or ideation sessions, and as I said, we'll include as wide a team as possible in those to make sure that we're getting diversity of thought into them. And we'll come up with as many ideas as possible. So we'll use, again, different kind of techniques within those brainstorming. Again, I can share some of them with you, but ones that we like to use are 10 plus 10. So you have 4 minutes to come up with 10 ideas. You share them with your team. You 4 minutes to come up with another 10 ideas. So that kind of generates really rapid idea generation. And another one that's a nice technique is the round robin. So somebody will write down their idea to the problem. They'll pass it to the person on their left, who will write down all the reasons why that idea won't work. And they'll pass it to the person on their left, who will write out why this idea could work even despite those problems. So that's a really kind of democratic way of ideation, and it just removes that kind of dominant voice in the room as well, because everybody can share. We'll also prioritize ideas. So we might decide on a matrix that we want to prioritize on. For example, how easy is it for the business to deliver it, and how impactful is it versus customers? Plot out ideas based on that matrix, and we'll get people to dot vote on their favorite ideas within the brainstorming session as well. So again, trying to keep it democratic and trying to avoid that kind of, you know, loudest voice in the room, or the hippo, the highest paid person's opinion. So trying to avoid that. And what we'll do then out of ideation is prototype some of the ideas that we had. And as I said, we'll try do really rough prototypes first of all, and go up higher and higher in fidelity. So some of the ideas that we tried and tested here in response to those problems that we defined, for make it easier, we simplified the menu board. So when Moo'd launched originally, it had a really wide range of products that were all on the menu board. So it's quite difficult to actually read, even the font was quite small on them. And there was definitely some products that, you know, were underperforming. But as well as that, a lot of the products had names like a McSwirly, things like that, that people felt a little embarrassed about going up to order. So in order to make it easier, we really kind of stripped it back to the key products. You can see in the background there of the first photo, very image-led, very easy to read, and clear pricing, which is also hugely important to people. Another thing that we discovered for making it easier is that kids are a huge consumer of ice cream, and they like to shop by pointing out what they like. So they're not going to go up and ask for a 99, they're just going to point at what they want. So we redesigned the counter layout. You can see the first one there is kind of sloped forward, so it's easy for a child to look into it. And equally with the toppings there to the right of the counter, that's at kind of eye level, so a child can look down into it and point out what they want. So that was just all about making the experience easier for people. In terms of make it more attractive, so we found that if Moo'd wasn't really standing out from the crowd, and when we dug down into what mattered to people, parents wanted to feel like they were giving their kids a treat, but that it wasn't complete junk food. And the fact that Moo'd is completely produced in Ireland from Irish milk was something that we sort of took for granted but weren't calling out, and actually that was hugely attractive to the audience that we were speaking to. So that became kind of front and center of our content. So Moo'd Irish ice cream, and really calling out the heritage and the quality of the product. And then finally, make it memorable. So for this, we created quirky serves for different occasions. So the picture there is our Easter egg ice cream. So this was for €5, you got half an Easter egg filled with soft whipped ice cream and topped with whatever toppings you chose on it. And that, again, just really stuck in people's head. We released a video when we launched at Easter that quickly went viral. But it just really kind of created a special kind of link back to Moo'd for people. And then finally, we needed to deliver the experience. So what you're doing here is you're really making sure that your commercials make sense. So there's no point having a brilliant customer experience if it's losing you money. So we took all of our learnings from the previous stage and from the prototyping. Some of them were non-runners, so we focused on what would make the biggest difference and create the best experience. And this seems like it's the last stage in the process, but because the process is iterative, you are always learning at this stage. So you're always going back to the other stages, even once your product or service is live and it's out there, you're constantly researching or testing ideas. And you can always learn new things once a product is live in the market, which can be the best place to learn. So again, I suppose the point is, don't be afraid to go out with something and perfect it later. It doesn't have to be perfect once you're launching it. So some of the things we'll do here is pilot test it. So with Moo'd, we didn't go out to the full central estate straight away. We tested it in 5 or 6 key stores to learn what mattered, make sure we were reaching our KPIs, keeping in feedback loops through retailers, through staff, through customers, and just iterating the ideas there to make tweaks and improvements for further launches. So with Moo'd, the new experience had an immediate impact, and I'll talk through some of the results in the end. But also having the product in a live environment helped us realize there was more opportunities. So one thing that happened quite naturally is that people were coming up, and they were actually coming up with the tubs from the salad bar and asking if they could have it filled with Moo'd ice cream and take it home. So that heightened the need for having a take-home ice cream offering, and that, which probably would have been maybe an 18-month innovation, was brought forward 6 months, and those 3 products on screen there were launched within 6 months, and that's widened out to a further 6 products now. And there's other opportunities now that we're seeing, like people looking for more frozen yogurt options, so they're all within the innovation pipeline. So that's an overview of the process we use to create great customer experience. So I suppose an experience consists of putting the customer at the heart of the products and the services you sell, thinking of all the touch points they interact with, and trying to deliver an emotional connection. So with Moo'd, the results of an improved customer experience led to great results. So we were in 50 stores and struggling when we started the project. That's now grown to 150 stores. Sales are over 10 million. And most importantly, Irish people love it. We're improving the mood of the nation, and we're on track to becoming the largest ice cream brand in Ireland. So that's it for me. Thanks a million, Helen, for giving me the opportunity to talk through. Don't know if there was any questions from people.
Yes, we have a few questions. That's great, Claire. Thanks very much. First of all, we had a question, and these, you may have covered them as we went through, but I'll go back over. I found that really interesting session. I love the insight about the 5-year-old boy, and also the different various tools and links you mentioned. That'll be great to get them off you, and we'll post them in the community, like you said. So thanks for that. Yeah. One question I had myself, just to start off, was you spoke again and again about this iterative. how do you get people away from this emotional clinging on that, well, we've come up with one idea and this is perfect. We have done one prototype and this is perfect, particularly if people are under pressure to hit sales targets or to get something out the door. So how do you stop the emotional clinging?
Yeah, I think the best way is if you bring in the voice of the consumer, it's not opinion versus opinion then. You're saying, we took your idea and tested it with people and they liked this about it, but they didn't like this about it. And you're kind of trying to keep the emotion out of it. One thing I'll try to do is always bring in data as well. So things like sales data to back up what I'm saying. So to show people that there is a further opportunity. I think that telling stories as well really sticks in people's heads. So if you can ideally get people, whoever is, say, responsible for that idea, to be with you when you test it with people, they'll see themselves what the reaction is and they really understand it. But if you don't have that opportunity, say if it's maybe a more senior stakeholder, using things like videos or anecdotes will really stick in people's heads then. So even you pointed out the little boy wanting to change his ice cream cup. That story really resonates with people. They get it straight away. Whereas I feel like if we had just gone in and said your cup shouldn't be pink anymore, people can take that personally and, you know, say, why should I believe you? It's just you telling me that. But if you can give them a story or a reason to believe, then that's really what helps in that. And that's not to say it's always perfect, because I have sat in presentations where I fed into and they've kind of left out some of the research that we'll find because it didn't suit their narrative. But I think what we found is that if they ignore something that's a very true consumer insight in their idea and launch ahead with it anyway, it probably will fail or not succeed to the level that they're expecting versus listening to that insight. And I think within Musgrave, we're getting that idea across more and more now.
Great. So I'll jump across to the chat, some questions. First one's from Anonymous. So in terms of your observation research, how many people do you typically interview or observe? What's a good number?
It does vary. If we use segments within Musgrave, so we'll have different consumer segments. So it'll depend who we're going after. So say if we've 3 or 4 segments, we'll try get a broad representation of each, or we might be very clear that this is just aimed at free females, for instance, which is one of our segments, and we'll go after those. But I think usually around kind of 10 to 15 people is good. People sometimes think that that's a very small number to represent and to kind of build something on. But what you'll find is themes very quickly emerge, and you'll see what matters to people, even with that kind of small base. And then anything where we're kind of unsure, is it just an anomaly, we'll always go back and do kind of quant testing on it to see how big an issue it is. But for in-depth, usually about 10 people would be, 10 per segment would be how many we would do.
Great, thank you. And another anonymous question, the insight for the colour of the cup is great, so stories do stick.
Yeah.
What other insights did you find?
In the Moo'd story in particular, I suppose even the kids pointing out how like kids shopping in that way by pointing rather than asking for things was a big one. Ice cream being a big sharing occasion was a big one. So a lot of people eat ice cream together. It's kind of nearly a bonding thing versus maybe if you're getting a treat for yourself, you might just get a chocolate bar. So that was probably one, maybe not an insight, but Irish people will eat ice cream any time of the year. So you have to be set up for all occasions. Yeah, so things like that were probably the big ones on Moo'd. We do, like, obviously there's other projects that I could talk about insights, but for me there are the main ones.
Particular stories or memorable insights that strike you from another project that come to mind quickly?
We did a huge piece of work last year on the value perception and super value. So super value will be seen as being traditionally more expensive than other retailers in Ireland. And that was one actually where people had a very adamant point of view of what we should do. So basically the kind of general traditional expectation was that all of our comms would be in our when we were talking about own brand would be in green. And what we did was we showed people shopping in the stores. We used eye tracking technology, we used videos, and people just not noticing green at all, even where we had massive green goalposts around products that they weren't. But we could have a tiny bit of yellow, and eyes would be drawn yellow because yellow was our color for special offers. So people were drawn to that one really easily. So that's probably a small one that, again, it totally changed people's kind of perceived behavior, and just through a genuine kind of observing of how people do actually shop.
Great, thank you. Another question, Grace, great case study. Thanks for sharing your experience with us. You touched on the importance of commercial viability. How do you define success up front, and how important are commercial KPIs during the process?
I think very important. So we would use a kind of wheel of desirability, which is your consumer insight. So is it desirable to consumers? Viability, so is it viable? Can we get it out there? And is it so that might be like your commercials and things, and is it feasible? So do we have, say, the technological or operational ability to deliver this? And we'll try kind of go through those at each stage of the project. I think also as well, when you're in an ideation session, although it's definitely great to have you know, not to put too many restrictions on things, sometimes if you actually kind of give people a challenge, like what if we had to deliver this with no money, it really gets people kind of thinking creatively as well. So sometimes putting restrictions in place can help, but I'm not sure if that answers your question properly.
And I think you touched on some of the results that you said in terms of the commercial KPIs. So I guess revenue was a big one, and the presence in stores for some of those commercial KPIs.
Yeah, exactly. And we'll, when I am briefing in a project, I'll make sure that we have KPIs set out. So whether it's increased footfall, increased sale. At the moment, I'm working on an NPD plan for the Happy Pear brand. So it's very much about it can be fine if people think it's desirable, but the more pressing things that we're trying to find out are, will they buy it? When will they buy it? How often will they buy it? Because we need to be building a business case for launching these products.
Great. A question from Martina. How do you track and measure success of a delivery? I guess that relates to what you've just said about building the business case. So maybe you can tell us a bit, when you go into delivery, go into some of these pilots, are you working on the KPIs, or how are you tracking and measuring success?
Yeah, we'll do it in a couple of different ways. The best projects are where we are doing full end-to-end service design. So where this works really well is, for example, with those brands that I mentioned, it's quite easy to say sales were at this, then we made this change and sales are now at this. We'll also use, one of the members on my team manages our transactional NPS score, which is all about kind of customer satisfaction and loyalty. So where we can, we'll try to make our projects joined up. So if this happened from a service design or customer experience perspective, it's had this impact on our NPS figures, and NPS is an indicator of loyalty and long-term sales. So it does vary by project, and I think a challenge for a lot of people in CX is proving the ROI of CX, because there's, you know, it's seen as a bit fluffy, but we're kind of trying to build a bank of case studies, but the only way to do that is have your KPIs set out up front and then continually kind of track and improve them afterwards. Currently, I've been working on a project for Caramico Pizza, which is a pizza brand that's in about 6 stores at the moment. So what I've done is looked at sales and identified a couple of areas where I feel they could be acquiring new shoppers more effectively and retaining the shoppers they have, and recommendations based on shopper behavior. So that should be a very clear one for me to see that once they've implemented those recommendations, have their sales increased, has frequency of purchase increased. So we're looking for more and more of those kind of very tangible case studies to further kind of sell the success of CX internally as well.
I think that's a great point, and something I definitely come up against again and again. CX is seen as too fluffy. So how do you make the case? And you know, you just have to lay it out and set those targets. Great. So a slightly different question for someone who wants to transition into service design. Any tips for how to do that to make a career change?
Yeah, there's brilliant. I think service design is very exciting at the moment, actually, because it was very new to me when I joined, but especially in Ireland and the UK, I think it's really just starting to take off. So I think the opportunities over the next few years will be absolutely huge within it. I think understanding it, even if it's not something you're doing at the moment, so reading up, there's loads of great courses. So I don't know if you're based in Ireland or the UK, but again, I can put up some courses from leading places that are doing it. The Service Design Network are running a lot of courses at the moment, and a lot of them are free during COVID-19. And then in Ireland, the Institute of Art and Design in Dunleary, Maynooth University, and NUIG would be big leaders in that. But I would say as well that there's a lot of the principles in service design that you can probably bring into whatever role you're doing at the moment, because it's just about looking at things from a human point of view and human behavior, which kind of touches all aspects of work, really. So I would say maybe start to learn a bit about it and bring it into your current role, and then maybe look out for those organizations like Service Design Network and places like that who are just brilliant for looking for kind of further opportunities.
Okay, great. Next question is, how long did the overall process, no, sorry, I'll come back to that question, but just while we're speaking about career and tips, any book that inspired you or that you recommend for a design expert?
Yeah, I have my little library actually back there behind me, because I love reading about service design and design. So one of the kind of most famous ones out there, I suppose, is This is Service Design Thinking and This is Service Design Doing, by Mark Stripbourne and a few others. But a book that I absolutely loved is called I'll probably get it wrong now, The Magic of Moments, which is by Chuck, and I'm awful, sorry, I'm remembering the names of people, but again, I'll put it up in the thing, but it's called Magic of Moments, and it really shows how just thinking about where you can add an extra bit of service gestures or memory imprints into your design, what a huge difference that can make to people overall.
Brilliant. We have so many questions, we're going to struggle to get through them all. So if we're about to time out, if we do, we will finish answering all of them over in the community. What would you have done differently in the whole Double Diamond framework? I guess that's looking at Double Diamond as a process. Is there anything you would have done differently?
Yeah, I think actually the Double Diamond process that we use is based on IDEO's original one, and IDEO brought out a few months ago. They redesigned the Double Diamond so that it's more iterative, and that's probably the one thing like that's very true. I think when I started in service design, I went through each step as if it was a step to be completed, because that's how I was used to project managing, whereas definitely more kind of fluid with it now and bringing in different tools. And then I think that point about bringing in viability and feasibility early on and keeping an eye on those throughout the process is probably something that's missing from the traditional Double Diamond, but is hugely important, especially for a business.
Great. And we had Colin mentioned as well, Can you give a summary of the problem definition at the end of the first diamond, and perhaps phrased as how might we if we were using IDEO's design thinking style?
Yeah, so for Moo'd, I suppose we might say how might we make buying ice cream easier and more enjoyable for customers? So that kind of would highlight kind of the major issues that we were facing, was that it wasn't easy for people, and it wasn't, you know, super emotive or anything like that. So that would be the way that I'd probably define that one. I try to keep my how might we's as simple as possible and in, you know, everyday language.
And just for anyone who's not familiar with how might we's, I think they're a really great tool for positioning hypotheses that you want to test or big assumptions, especially as you're going into the prototyping stage or creation stage. What's that problem that you want to answer?
Yeah, there's actually a great example. I said the best how might we I ever saw is from I think it was in Sweden. They were trying to get more people to use the stairs in a public transport, and they started out with their how might we get more people to use the stairs, and they reframed it as how might we make choosing to use the stairs more fun, and that completely repositioned it in people's heads. And they ended up with a piano going up the stairs that played music as people walked on it, and everybody started using the piano stairs by the end of the week. So I definitely think there's power in a good how might we statement, because it changes how the types of ideas you come up with then.
That's a great example. I love that. A couple of questions I'll pair together here. How many people were in your design team? And also, how were you involved in the operations as a result of the work? So maybe you can talk a bit more about the team. This person says, with the change projects I've been on, it's often difficult to manage the various departments involved in delivery. So the shop staff, supply chain, customer service, and so on. So maybe you can talk about the people in both design and delivery.
Yeah, our design team is tiny. Like the customer experience team in total is 3 people. I manage the service design, and it's really me and an intern most of the time. But so it can be difficult, I suppose, but I think I'm lucky because I had a history in Musgrave. I would have worked in marketing, so more operational roles. So I had existing relationships with people. I think that came up actually with your question with Joe and Martina, is probably about how do you sort of influence change, and I think relationships is the biggest way. I think as well, it definitely came up in your chat with Joe, was people saying, you know, how do you don't want to be in your ivory tower of like, here's a great design, but you're not operations, so someone else has to deliver it. So I think showing that you'll kind of get stuck in, and that you're as invested in the project as anyone else, that you're doing the kind of grunty work of interviewing and shopping with people and all of that kind of stuff, that can definitely help. Operationally, our teams can be they're probably usually a kind of main trading manager, a main marketing person, and a main sales person. So they're probably quite tight, but then there's obviously a lot of other stakeholders involved in it as well. So more senior stakeholders, you know, people who we've brought in to kind of input into the project as well. So that's probably my advice on it, is just build good relationships. But it can be frustrating when you've, you know, designed something and you know it'll make a difference, and it takes ages to see it actually implemented, and you've very little power over that.
Great. And then very final question is, how long did the overall process take, or is there even a standard time?
Usually we say things will take about 3 months. I don't think I've ever worked on one where it has taken 3 months. And because the process is iterative, there can be that danger of it's never finished, you know, because someone will come back to you in a few months and say, oh, we want to see how this is working now, and you kind of hope it. But I would say if you're committing to a project, you could complete the double diamond in 3 months, and it's best to do it in a contained period of time, I think, because it keeps people's interest in it high as well.
Great. Now, thank you so much, everyone, for all the questions.
Thanks, Marianne.
And Chris and Colin have added some more comments there. Let me post them in the community. So for those of you who aren't familiar, the Spark community we've just set up for CX and transformation professionals. We'll post the links to the various resources as well as the replay of the recording, and it's free to join as well. So I'll send a link out after the session. Claire, that was really interesting, and I was taking loads of notes here. I can already see lots of very practical tips for how I can apply it in the project I'm working on at the moment. So thank you very much for your time, and looking forward to continuing the conversation over in the community. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks a million for the opportunity, and thanks everybody for your great questions.
Yes, thank you everyone for your engagement. Well done. Take care.